The Holocaust.
The Holocaust isn't about race.
Her co-host seemed taken aback.
No, it's not about race.
Ethnicity.
No, it's
Jews
about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about race.
What is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man.
Whoopi Goldberg was 100% correct. The Holocaust was not about race. In order for them to identify the Jews from any other group that they had to depict them from, whether it's the Poles, the Russians, any other race, they had to have those Jews wear a significant identifying marker, such as a yellow star, a yellow 6-point star. You did not have to do that when you was dealing with racism in America. Europeans acted as if they don't understand what is ethnic and the difference between race. The truth is they understand ethnic cleansing because they speak on it consistently, right? When they speak on the Uyghurs of China, how the Chinese treat them, they don't call it a different race, they call it ethnic cleansing, right? What your witnesses is an attempt to steal Black people culture.
When the Germans came in March 19th in 1944, we were told we have to wear a yellow star and everybody has to have it on their clothing and nobody can go out without having it on. And if you are caught without having it on, then you would be punished.
Today's topic, where I'd like to talk about this infamous symbol used by the Nazis in their persecution of Jews, the yellow star. Jews in Holland were forced to wear stars in public beginning on May 3rd, 1942. Different stars were used in different parts of occupied Europe, Nazi-occupied Europe, and were imposed at different times. So the date is also relevant here. In this case, in Holland, the star was required after May of 1943 and 1942, but in other places it happened at different times. This is another star that we have in our collection, which may look more familiar with the German word Jude, Jew, in the middle, emblazoned in the center there. In this case, we know that this was a star worn by Julius Frohle, the grandfather of Howard Mayer, who was the second chairman of the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center. Today, I want to use these two stars as a starting point for talking about some of the different stars that were used by the Nazis and about the requirements that were imposed in different countries. The version from France, where the French word for Jew, Juif, was included in the center, and the somewhat different star developed in Czechoslovakia and in Romania.
We were there, we had to wear them. We had more now that I think because it was March and we had an overcoat and it was on that, and I had a short jacket and it was on that too. It was sewn on. So I always wore either the long coat or the jacket.
So this is an example, for example, of a Jewish star button.
Be clear, these are prime ministers of Turkey, right? And that woman was a Jew from Poland. This Turkey and Poland prime ministers. This is the Turkey soldiers. This is Germany soldiers. This is Russian soldiers. What I want you to understand is they could not identify the Jews from any other people in that area because they all looked alike. Therefore, we're talking about ethnic cleansing and not racial.
Basically, what we're going to be talking about is in the middle of the 8th century, a large and powerful empire with regional control throughout much of the northern Caspian region, which would be today Ukraine, the Caucasus region, and over into Kazakhstan, simply decided to convert to Judaism all at once. And they remained Jewish for several hundred years. We have a lot of corroborating evidence that this actually happened.
Who were the Khazars, and where did they come from? This is a question that has many general answers, but not many specific ones. Most scholars in the field believe that the Khazars were a predominantly Turkic-speaking people who likely originated from the steppes of Central Asia or the Ural Mountains. However, the specifics of these origins are still somewhat obscure due to the fact that they left few archaeological remains from their early years. There have, though, been many conflicting writers and historians who have speculated on Khazar origins. For example, one of their contemporaries from the early 9th century, the Greek historian and monk Theophanes, called the Khazars Eastern Turks. The Arab chronicler and historian Al-Masudi wrote in the 10th century that, and I quote, "The Khazars are a tribe of the Turks." Even the Chinese claim to have known of the Khazars, as a chronicle known as the Ta'ang Shu stated that the Khazars, and I quote, "belong to the stock of the Turks." Even after their conversion to Judaism, most Jewish scholars maintained that the Khazars were Turks. Syriac writings also more or less say the same thing. In addition, descriptions of their horseback riding and battle formation techniques generally describe a style that was similar to many Turkic peoples of Central Asia. So, using the info just mentioned, for our purposes, we'll conclude that the Khazars were indeed a Turkic-speaking people originally from the steppes of Eurasia.
And philosopher developed into a massive book. The story goes like this. Basically, there is this King Bulan, who somewhere around the year 740 is, a very spiritual individual and concerned with the practice of paganism among his people, and looking at the growth of monotheistic movements, particularly Christianity and Islam. And both Christianity and Islam are making geographic headway in Central Asia and approaching his borders. And he thinks to himself, oh, so what should I be doing? Should I be remaining a pagan? Should I join one of these other faiths, and so on? And so he has a debate where he brings together a Jew, a Muslim, and a Christian. I know it sounds like an offensive joke, but it's not. And he has them have a trilateral debate over which religion is superior. In the end, as you might expect, given the fact that this is Rabbi Yehuda Halevi writing it, King Bulan decides to accept Judaism, and all of his court and the Khazarian people ultimately follow him into Judaism. That's essentially the story.
At the beginning of the 8th century, the Mediterranean world was polarized primarily between Christianity and Islam, faiths which served almost as the religious arm of their respective realms and would inevitably be used to gain political domination over the newly converted. The Khazar Empire was a powerful realm of its own, which represented a third force, and had proved itself a diplomatic and military equal to the Caliphate and the Empire, even having placed their own candidate on the Roman throne. Yet, interacting with these sophisticated civilizations had made Khazar rulers realize that their Tengriist shaman beliefs could not grant spiritual, legal, and dynastic legitimacy like the great monotheistic faiths could. However, the Khazars could not accept Christianity or Islam. Accepting conversion to either superpower's religion would automatically subordinate Khazars to either the emperor or the caliph. So, it seemed like the only logical choice was to, as the third major power, choose the third major religion, which did not have as many strings attached, Judaism.
The reason for the transformation truly is that the Black Jews had a righteous standing throughout the world because of their religious and spiritual beliefs, right? And he understood this, and they had certain protections throughout various cultures, the Roman Christian Empire as well as throughout the Muslim Empire, because the Judaism is the foundation for monotheism. So what the white people was doing was they were stealing our heritage, right? In order to position themselves as righteous people on earth. And the reason why they chose the Judaism is because they had land and they was able to exalt control over Judaism rather than the religion exalt control over them. Such would happen if they would choose Christianity, where they would have to be a part of under the Pope, or they would have to be under the Caliph, because understand, religion at this time was used to control people.
Jews and Christians living under Sharia law in the 8th century were considered people of the book, whose belief in the God of Abraham predated the founding of Islam. And as such, they were accorded the right to freely practice their faith in private and to receive some state protection. In turn, they paid a special tax and were often compelled to wear an identifying mark to indicate their protected status.
So have a look at this map here. We looked at a version of this a little earlier. If you consider where Khazaria was, right up over here in this region, going up into Ukraine. So Christianity, starting out in Rome, basically, I mean, from Israel over here to Rome, has taken over all of Europe, except for Spain, and is pressing with great progress towards northern Baltic states like Lithuania, Latvia, and so on. And pagans are just converting left and right because the Christian faith with life after death and a just God and prayer and things like that was ultimately far more appealing, especially the idea of belonging to a global faith, you know, with a very consistent, coherent ideology. You compare that to polytheism with its multiple gods and multiple narratives and really no real place for human beings in it. It was very weak. Islam at the same time is expanding incredibly dramatically. We're talking about 740, right? So this purple area, it starts in 622, and this purple area really measures what it's like in the year 750. So Islam spreads, you know, like in a viral way, as it were. It becomes so popular as it conquers regions and as people willingly give themselves up to become Muslims. So here's Khazaria sandwiched between Christian Europe and Muslim Europe, and they have to decide, well, are we going to become absorbed in a larger Muslim reality, absorbed within a larger Christian reality, or shall we try to stake out our own kind of independent region by adopting Judaism?
So what you're looking at is these group of individual Europeans from Turkey, right, claimed our heritage, right, our culture, and then they went, and once they lost their land, they went over to Europe and lived up in Russia. So when they lost their land, they scattered up to Russia, Poland, all up in Europe. What I want you to do is, I want you to look at this map. I want you to look at, this is, they're trying to claim they're Jews, right? This is where Russia's at. You're talking Poland. They lost their land in around 900 BC, right? So they scattered up here. Russia, this is where Hitler was attacking the Germans at, the Jews at. These are the Jews that was up there that are trying to claim the land of Israel, which is right here, right? What the white people is trying to say is that black Jews who come up out of Africa, they trying to say these Jews who were black come up out of Africa, right? They trying to say they travel all the way up there. No, every time them blacks was attacked, they went back into Africa, right? This is why you have this is why you have Jews and over here up in France, and this is what they were following where the Muslims ruled, because the Muslims had a law that protected them, right? All these areas up this way was heavy into slavery. This would make no sense to go this way for this black nation.
I'd like to broaden our perspective a little bit on Russian Jewish history by suggesting that there was a reason why so many Jews of the world, really 3/4 of the world's Jewish population, wound up there by the 19th century. What I'd like to suggest is that the Jews had managed to achieve their relatively secure and prosperous existence. And this only really began to break down to a great extent with pogroms and eventually the Holocaust, rather late in the game, towards the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. But there are centuries preceding that, as I said, of a certain kind of coexistence between Jews and Christians.
You're talking at least 200, 300, 400 years of assimilation between the Jews of Khazar and the Russians. So it was nearly impossible to identify which was which. This is why they had to wear badges. So when Whoopi Goldberg said the Holocaust was not about race, it was about white people treating white people badly, she was 100% correct.
An excellent example of the kind of achievements that are associated very closely with the Golden Age of Spain, where Jews were, unlike any other time really in Jewish history, with maybe a possible exception in contemporary America, where you begin to see this bit by bit. You have people who are like of incredible stature as religious Jews, meaning they contributed literature in Hebrew about the religious texts and so on, and at the same time, very powerful, influential politicians in the secular realm. Chasta ibn Shaprut, Shmuel ibn Nagrela, to a certain degree, Yehuda Halevi, Shlomo ibn Gabriel. There's a whole list of people who really achieved, greatness in both worlds. Here in America today, we have a little bit of that, let's say, with, Orthodox Jewish politicians reaching great heights, things like that, but it still pales in comparison to Spain. Anyways, Chasta ibn Shaprut was...
These are Black Jews in Spain. This is who the Khazar was corresponding with when he was speaking about transferring religious-wise into Judaism, right? But they had no nation. So what they did was the Black Jews, to prevent from going into slavery and things of that nature, they had certain protections under the under Islam, right? So you had the Berber Muslims, which was a larger majority of Muslims at this time, who gave the Black Jews certain forms of protections. So as you will see, the Black Jews normally traveled and moved throughout the world alongside these Black Berber Muslims. There's no question how the Africans, the Egyptians depicted themselves and their skin pigmentation by the hieroglyphs on the walls all throughout Egypt, right? So there's no doubt that Moses was passed as the grandson of the Pharaoh Ramses, and according to the Bible genealogy, Ramses was a Cushite, right? Cushite is modern day Somali. So we know how modern day Somali people's skin complexions is. So if Moses was able to pass off as a modern day, as a Cushite throughout the times of the Egyptians, meaning he had to be a Black man. This is without doubt, right? So the Hebrews did not become a Semitic people until they moved out into Israel when they was dealing with the Hittites. And then they started being taken into slavery by the Assyrians, right? That's when they became a Semitic people. They would never run east because the Assyrians and all the people who really took them into slavery were east. It has been proven that they was not in slavery in Egypt. If anybody does any homework, they clearly found out that the Egyptians' system was a system based off pay. The people who built the pyramids were paid, and they even created strikes if they felt that they wasn't paid significant amounts. This has been proven throughout history, so slaves did not build the pyramids, right? So the Jews were not enslaved throughout Africa. They was being enslaved by the Assyrians. White people are attempting to steal our identity. When they lost their land, the Khazars, and they moved into Russia, had to go into Poland, right? They had already stolen our identity as far as who we are socially and spiritually. Now they come back to steal the land.
With DNA analysis, looking at various populations to try to determine how likely it is that they are in fact Jewish. And especially in Africa, there have been several populations that have been identified as having a very high statistical relationship to contemporary Jews.